Hey guys, this is your host Richard with another marvelous video. Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? If not, then you've come to the right place. Hello Star Wars fans, in today's video we'll delve into the dark side of the Force, because we're going to be talking about Darth Plagueis, a Sith Lord, a master of Sith alchemy so powerful that he could trick death, bring back the dead, and even create life. Darth Plagueis has never appeared on screen, but the aforementioned opening line about the character has become top meme material ever since his mention in the 2005 movie Revenge of the Sith. Darth Plagueis was obsessed with cracking the code to immortality, and even though he got really close, immortality always eluded him. Engulfed by paranoia and experiments, Darth Plagueis renounced sleep for 20 years, and when he finally got some shut-eye, he never really woke up from it. All thanks to his apprentice, the evil Sith Lord Darth Sidious. Want to know more about this paranoid Star Wars fella who knew how to cheat death but couldn't save his own life? Then grab your lightsabers and popcorn tubs, because we're about to begin. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Who is Darth Plagueis? What species does he belong to? Betrayal runs in the Sith family. The resident baddie of Star Wars, aka Darth Vader, betrayed his master, Darth Sidious, who betrayed his master, Darth Plagueis, who betrayed his mentor, Darth Tenebrous. But why did Darth Plagueis do that? Well, let's start at the beginning. Before he was Darth Plagueis, he was Higo Damask II of the Mun species, belonging to the planet of Munilist. The Mun species from the Star Wars universe are known for their intellectual prowess and peculiar appearance. These humanoids have long, slender bodies with lengthy limbs, fingers, and an abnormally long face, particularly an elongated, hairless skull. They have eyes in deep pockets and a shallow nose that gives them a nasal speech. Their tiny ears are often cradled underneath their skull cap. Their skin color can range from pale pink and gray to even white and green sometimes. The Muns have 5 fingers on their hands, with the last 2 digits significantly smaller than the rest. An average Mun is around 6.5 feet tall, with some measuring even up to 8 feet. As per Endless Vigil, the sourcebook for Star Wars gaming series Force and Destiny, Muns have 3 hearts, adding to their resilience and stamina. The Mun have exceptional dexterity over knowledge in general, especially economics and mathematics. Because of their business acumen, the Muns are prominently associated with the powerful financial organization Intergalactic Banking Clan, thus making their home planet a financial powerhouse in the galaxy. It all begins when Darth Tenebrous manipulates a Force-sensitive she-Mun into seducing Car Damask, a wealthy Mun working for the Intergalactic Banking Clan, who too was Force-sensitive. Thus, Higo Damask is born and grows up as a regular Mun, unaware that he's being observed by the Sith Lord Darth Tenebrous himself. Born as a result of Darth Tenebrous's manipulation, Higo harbors some sort of innate darkness within himself, which reveals itself for the first time when he forces his friend to jump to his death just for the thrill of it. Impressed by Higo's evil deed, Darth Tenebrous welcomes this Mun as his apprentice and renames him Darth Plagueis. Tenebrous introduces Plagueis to the dark side of the Force and teaches him to wield it, and also trains him to manipulate the midi-chlorians. For those who need a refresher, midi-chlorians are microscopic life forms within living cells, which enable one to connect with the Force. It allows Force-sensitive beings to yield the Force. Plagueis becomes part of Tenebrous's long-term plan, as he aims to overthrow the Jedi Order someday, and he inculcates the same ambition within Plagueis, who's growing better at midi-chlorian manipulation with each passing day. Meanwhile, the mentor-apprentice duo travel to the Outer Rim planet Baldemnik to explore the natural deposits of the substance called cortosis, which can resist lightsabers. During the exploration, a droid accidentally digs through a pocket of highly combustible gas, causing a massive explosion. Tenebrous is able to shield himself and Plagueis by wielding the Force, while Plagueis saves their spaceship from destruction. While both survive, the close-range explosion takes a toll on the older Tenebrous, and Plagueis sees this as an opportune moment to kill his master. In accordance with Sith tradition and the rule of 2, the rule states that there can be 2 Sith Lords at the same time, a Sith Master and the apprentice. When powerful enough, the apprentice can kill the master to become the new Sith Master and take another apprentice to keep this cycle going. Plagueis manipulates the Force to bring down falling debris on Tenebrous, but pretends that was accidental and rushes to his master's aid. But Plagueis can't resist revealing the truth to Tenebrous and tells him that he plans to abolish Darth Bane's rule of 2 before snapping his master's neck. He then proceeds to perform a few quick midi-chlorian manipulating experiments to bring Tenebrous back from the dead, but fail. Plagueis escapes the planet, hiding in a spaceship where he kills all the travelers and befriends the 11-4D droid that nurses him back to health. He erases the droid's memories, except for the medical knowledge, and returns to his home planet Munilist to resume his life as Higo Damask, the top boss of Damask Holding. In time, Ego learns of plasma resources located underground on the planet of Naboo and makes his way to the planet. But before that, he encounters another Sith named Darth Venomous, a Bith, who was secretly trained by Tenebris as a contingency plan in case Plagueis failed to further the fallen Sith Lord's plans. Venomous is easily one-upped by Plagueis, who makes the weaker Sith swear allegiance to him before poisoning him and killing him. Plagueis then experiments on Venomous about manipulating midichlorians to further his research on immortality. Plagueis also tracks down every other Force-sensitive beings on a list carried by Venomous and murders them one by one, fearing they might pose a threat to his plans. Ego Damask then refocuses on Naboo. In exchange for extracting plasma from the planet, Ego agrees to help Bon Tapalo become the king of the planet. It's at this point that Plagueis hears of a young royal named Palpatine, who helps Bon Tapalo's faction with secret information. Plagueis senses the darkness inside Palpatine and befriends him, using him as an informer. Palpatine, who doesn't share a great rapport with his own father, begins to respect Plagueis as a father figure. Palpatine's father doesn't support Bon Tapalo, and when he learns of Palpatine's association with Plagueis and the faction, he attempts to send his son away. In a fit of rage, Palpatine slaughters his family members with his untamed dark power and confesses to Plagueis, who then congratulates Palpatine for embracing his dark side. Plagueis reveals his identity as a Sith Lord and accepts Palpatine as his apprentice, Darth Sidious. Palpatine trains under Plagueis for 11 years. In addition to learning about the dark ways of the Sith, Palpatine also becomes an important political persona in Naboo and eventually slaughters the senator to take the position himself. As the Sith duo further their political goals, Palpatine becomes more and more interested in the true nature of Plagueis' experiments and suspects the mentor isn't telling him everything. Meanwhile, Plagueis has been experimenting on the dead Darth Venomous, and after resurrecting and killing him several times, Plagueis finally grants his former apprentice death. Around this time, Palpatine's political opponent sends assassins to murder Plagueis, and in retaliation, Palpatine infiltrates the opponent's party and goes on a murder spree, leaving no survivors. This attack on Plagueis weakens the Sith Lord and puts him on a breathing device, making him all the more paranoid about completing his research on immortality, so much so that he trains himself to abandon sleep. Before we go on, we'd like to remind you that Darth Plagueis has never made an on-screen appearance so far, and hence all this backstory comes from the novel Star Wars Darth Plagueis by James Luceno, released in 2012. Back to the storyline now. 2 decades have passed, and this is the point in Plagueis' backstory that the novel coincides with the events of pre-existing Star Wars stories and merges with the timeline of the 1999 movie The Phantom Menace. Palpatine and his mentor learn of a Force-sensitive young slave named Anakin Skywalker being discovered by the Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn on the desert planet of Tatooine. Plagueis, who's been working on creating life with the Force for a decade, strongly believes that Anakin is the result of his experiments. Meanwhile, owing to his political success, Palpatine is all set to become the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic and promises to make Plagueis the co-chancellor as he had wished in the past. As the two celebrate over drinks, Palpatine keeps Plagueis drinking. Intoxicated, Plagueis falls asleep for the first time in 2 decades. And just as Palpatine is about to leave, his dark side takes over and he blasts a web of Force lightning at his master and destroys his transpirator. It's now that Palpatine reveals his anger toward Plagueis for not sharing his most powerful secrets to Palpatine. He reprimands Plagueis for turning his attention away from his apprentice and their political plans in favor of discovering the secret to immortality, and kills Plagueis in one final Force blast, thus becoming the Sith Master himself. As Palpatine becomes the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic, he commences his plans to take over the galaxy, and the biggest part of his machinations was to turn Anakin Skywalker into a Sith. Later, in Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine, who's secretly the Sith Lord Darth Sidious, narrates the tragedy of Plagueis' death to a young Anakin Skywalker. "It's not a story the Jedi would tell you, it's a Sith legend," he tells Anakin. In an attempt to lure Anakin to the dark side of the Force, Palpatine explains how Darth Plagueis could cheat death and extend one's longevity, but sadly he couldn't save himself from death. Darth Sidious tells Anakin Skywalker how Plagueis was killed by his own apprentice, who learnt all the dark secrets from him, but never mentions that the murderous apprentice is Darth Sidious himself. This becomes one of the most popular scenes from the movie, often referenced in pop culture and even featuring in memes. Anakin goes on to become Darth Sidious's apprentice and turns into Darth Vader, the iconic villain of the Star Wars franchise, who also eventually betrays and kills his mentor. Differences between Darth Plagueis and other Sith Lords. Darth Plagueis was seen as a narcissist who prioritized his own personal need of gaining immortality over the Sith's grand plan that was set in motion by Darth Bane. Darth Plagueis attempted to abolish the rule of 2, of a mentor and an apprentice, but still took in Darth Sidious as his second-in-command, only to further his selfish goals. In the dying moments of Plagueis, Sidious goes on a rant about how Plagueis exploited him instead of teaching him the secrets of immortality. In a fit of rage, Sidious says, "It was Ego Damask as Plagueis who set his sights on a seemingly confused young man and with meticulous skill manipulated him into committing patricide, matricide, fratricide. Darth Plagueis, who took him as an apprentice, sharing some of his knowledge but withholding his most powerful secrets, denying the apprentice his wishes as a means of controlling him, instilling in him a sense of murderous rage, and turning him to the dark side. Sidious's speech pretty much highlights how Darth Plagueis was more concerned with achieving immortality than carrying out the grand plan that would benefit the Sith at large. Plagueis once rebuked Sidious for hiring an incompetent assassin to murder a senator, but Plagueis himself didn't have the foresight to predict his own assassination attempt. It was Sidious and other associates who bailed him out of fatal situations. In fact, he even died a very silly death in his sleep, unable to save himself from dying or achieve immortality even after years of experiments. Some would say that given the fact that Plagueis' apprentice grew more powerful and eventually replaced him, is where Plagueis' success lies as a Sith. But Plagueis' death was so silly, it takes away some of his credibility as a Sith master. In fact, Plagueis' mentor Tenebrous thought so lowly of him that he felt the need to secretly train another apprentice. If we're to look at it from another perspective, Plagueis could afford to be arrogant because A. he was a scientific genius, and B. his ability to manipulate the dark side of the Force was far greater than most of his predecessors and successors. Moreover, his own master violated the rule of two when he secretly trained Darth Venomous, so Plagueis' decision to disrespect the rule was understandable. Plus, Plagueis' vast knowledge of the Force and midi-chlorian manipulation was mostly self-taught, as Tenebrous didn't train him properly. How did Plagueis' mastery of Sith alchemy, which extended his lifespan, manifest physically? Did it slow his aging or cause other bodily alterations? Plagueis was of the strong belief that the Sith should be able to surpass natural limitations, even death. Driven by this, he became obsessed with understanding how midi-chlorians work, the macroscopic lifeforms that exist within all living cells and allow Force-sensitive ones to connect to the Force. He carried out cruel experiments, manipulating the life force of his test subjects. This was paired with his mastery of the dark side, which helped him push the boundaries of life and death so that he could achieve a state where he can control life itself. So Plagueis basically wanted to manipulate the power of the Force to control life by experimenting with midi-chlorians. Plagueis set up his base on Munilist, where he resided within a massive lair on the island of Abora. In addition to his laboratory, Plagueis had access to one of the finest libraries outside Obroa Sky, or the Jedi Temple, or Coruscant, protected in a climate-controlled environment that contained texts on Sith treatises and biological studies of various species. Plagueis held at least a dozen species captive in cages and bacta tanks to carry out his experiments with midi-chlorian manipulation, particularly to study the durability and hybridization of various species and the creation and extension of life itself. Needless to say that many of these subjects died gruesome deaths, either from prolonged experiments or from diseases. His most horrifying experiments were on Tenebrous' second pupil, Darth Venomous, who was first poisoned and killed so that he could be revived and experimented on again and again till his organs gave up. While Plagueis wasn't able to achieve immortality, he surely succeeded in expanding his lifespan by manipulating the midi-chlorians. This likely slowed his aging process, as he was able to maintain his physical health and mental prowess over his extended living years. Plagueis' steady physical strength and mental faculty suggest that the midi-chlorian manipulation was able to prevent any sort of deterioration that comes with old age. Plagueis' unique elongated anatomy is because of his Mun lineage, and not because of any physical deformities. In fact, unlike other Sith Lords such as Darth Nihilus and Darth Sidious, Plagueis doesn't undergo any sort of grotesque transformation because of his association with dark side alchemy. His appearance remains unchanged, as opposed to the Sith Lords whose physical appearance was corrupted by constant exposure to the dark side of the Force. Plagueis used to experiment with telepathy, healing and regeneration, among other things, and his ability to manipulate midi-chlorians granted him healing and regenerative capabilities, thus prolonging his longevity. This also means that Plagueis didn't require bodily alterations on an external level because his biology altered at a cellular or metabolic level. Did Plagueis' mastery of the dark side of the Force grant him heightened senses or increased strength? What are his extraordinary powers? Plagueis' connection with the dark side of the Force was so strong that his arrival in Naboo caused the coldest winter on the planet, freezing the mountains, plains, and the waterways. Plagueis' extensive use of the dark Force on Abora even turned the Munilist island into a vortex of dark energy. Plagueis was no ordinary being, and hence when Sidious killed him, his death released an enormous tremor within the Force, one that shook the planet to its core. Plagueis' dark powers enhanced after he murdered Darth Tenebrous, but that didn't mean an immediate increase in his midi-chlorian count, because he rushed to test his blood, and the results came out same as before. However, by reviving Darth Venomous time and again, and exploiting the Bith's midi-chlorian resources, Plagueis was eventually successful in increasing his own midi-chlorian count. He began to feel more rejuvenated, and his healing started showing up on his face that was scarred by the Maladian attack. The damaged tissues healed, the wounds on his face softened and faded, and he was able to breathe more freely for the first time since the attack. When the skin beneath his mask turned smooth, Plagueis realized that he's finally learned to stop the aging process. As an extraordinary master of the dark force and a genius Sith alchemist, Plagueis was able to cultivate some terrifying powers, the most influential of them being midi-chlorian manipulation. Through this, Plagueis was able to instruct the midi-chlorian to heal, resurrect, even create life or lower bodily defense. He could also kill a living being by eliminating their midi-chlorian altogether. Through the force, Plagueis could even conceive life within creatures, calling them pregnancies. He could increase the midi-chlorian count of living beings through a process called asexual fission, and his dream project was to create a being with a midi-chlorian count as high as 20,000 per cell, which is more than any Sith or Jedi in recorded history. Plagueis and Sidious both orchestrated rituals to tamper with midi-chlorians and influence the Force into spreading darkness across the galaxy. It's their attempt to imbalance the energies that prompted the Force to fight back through the creation of Anakin Skywalker, a boy with an unnaturally high midi-chlorian count. In addition to his midi-chlorian manipulation ability, Plagueis had some terrifyingly dark powers in his arsenal. As a Sith Lord, he could release raw Force lightning in the form of electricity, electrocute his opponents simply by touching them, like he did with the dark side prophetess, and reduce them to dust with mere hand gestures, like he did with Wandao. Plagueis' lightning was powerful enough to set an entire landscape ablaze. His Force telekinesis powers were also unmatched. Remember, he brought down almost an entire cave on Tenebrous to bury the guy? Plagueis could release a telekinetic wave that atomized the Maladian assassins. Plagueis was also able to release a Force scream that stunned and shattered the eardrums of the assassins around him. He also choked an unsuspecting Sidious while interrogating him, simply by putting together his fingers. To top it all, Plagueis can move so fast that he appeared as a blur, not only to Sidious, but also to the droid 114D, which could dodge blaster bolts. Did Plagueis' prolonged lifespan negatively affect his body, changing his appearance or causing unusual ailments? Following the assassination attempt on Plagueis on the planet of Sojourn, where he maintained a retreat, the Sith Lord suffered some terrible injuries. The hired Maladian assassins used explosives to breach the security of the retreat, and even though Plagueis was able to kill some of them and managed to survive, he was left with severe burns, cuts, and broken bones. The attack left him with scars and a heightened sense of paranoia, prompting him to become more engrossed in the discovery of immortality. It also made him extremely wary of others, and convinced him even further to carry out his quest for immortality. Plagueis' transformation in the novel is described in very graphic words, and we quote, "If the Maladian attack had weakened him physically, it had also helped to shape his etheric body into a vessel sufficiently strong to contain the full power of the dark side. His dexterity at midi-chlorian manipulation enabled him to heal from his wounds, and his knowledge of Sith alchemy accelerated his healing process. While Darth Plagueis healed, he never really fully recovered. Being a scientific genius, Plagueis discovered a breathing apparatus, an alloy transpirator mask, to keep him alive. The injuries and his increased lifespan made Plagueis look rather weary and haggard in the 2 decades following the attack. He walked with a hunch. The veins seemed to protrude out from beneath his thinning skin, and his already lean physique became skinnier, giving him a deathly skeletal appearance. His lower jaw and flattened nose was ruined following the attack, but all that remained hidden beneath his triangular transpirator mask. Plagueis' alloy mask covered more than just his mouth, stretching out to his elongated neck. The mask was attached to a transpirator placed on his chest, underneath an armored harness. He had to eat and drink through feeding tubes and through his nose. What are the known weaknesses in Darth Plagueis' physiology that his enemies could exploit? Plagueis' big fat mistake was to trust his apprentice, prompting Darth Sidious to tell him, "You were far too trusting, Plagueis. No true Sith can ever really care about another. This has always been known." On the night that Plagueis was murdered and Sidious became the Master, the duo was celebrating their political success. Sidious was about to become the Supreme Chancellor, and Plagueis his co-chancellor. A night of drinking and revelry ended with Plagueis getting extremely intoxicated that allowed him to fall asleep for the first time in 20 years. Darth Sidious saw this as an opportune moment to rise up the Sith ranks. He fired a blast of Force lightning at Plagueis' breathing device. Plagueis woke up from his slumber and realized that he was unable to breathe. It took Plagueis a while to fathom that he was being attacked by his apprentice, but even then, he remained still. Plagueis, who had devoted his life to the discovery of eternal life, believed at this moment that he was immortal. Even if Sidious fatally injured him, he would survive. That was his next big mistake. Plagueis felt the Force accumulate inside him, and he tried to gather his midi-chlorians to regain strength, but Sidious incapacitated him with another Force lightning blast. Sidious pointed out that he had figured out a way to kill his supposedly unkillable master by destroying his breathing device. Thus, gathering midi-chlorians was of no help to Plagueis if he couldn't breathe. Some might say it was too easy a death for a Sith master as powerful as Plagueis. It's questioned that how could he not foresee Sidious's plans of killing him, given that Plagueis could gain clairvoyant information and read his friend's dishonest intentions ever since he was a child. If we're to theorize, Plagueis. Darth Sidious secretly despised Plagueis, but didn't have a pre-designed plan of slaughtering his master that night. Sidious's dark side took over at that fateful moment, and hence he carried out the killing on a murderous spree. Moreover, Plagueis was heavily intoxicated and unsuspectingly fell into deep sleep, so at that particular moment, couldn't really gauge what was coming for him. Also, Plagueis' foresight presumably got messed up when his master Tenebrous had tried to take over his body with maxi-chlorians. Plagueis' overconfidence that he wouldn't die even when being attacked and his breathing device both turned out to be his Achilles heel, resulting in his inglorious death. Is Darth Plagueis immortal? Well, the novel makes it clear that Darth Plagueis died in his sleep, and there's been no news of his resurrection ever since. Even in Revenge of the Sith, Darth Sidious clearly states that Plagueis was murdered by his apprentice, and describes it as a tragedy. It's ironic that Plagueis could save others from death, but not himself. Despite Plagueis' lifelong efforts, he never really achieved immortality. He could cheat death and create life, and keep his loved ones from dying, but none of that was permanent. Interestingly though, while Plagueis couldn't achieve immortality, it deeply influenced his apprentice, who continued Plagueis' work. Darth Sidious eventually managed to come back from the dead in the 2019 movie The Rise of Skywalker by transferring his essence to a clone, suggesting that Darth Plagueis' teachings lived on through his apprentice. However, despite Star Wars canon confirming that Darth Plagueis never really achieved eternal life, there are some fan theories that like to speculate otherwise. The first of which is essence transfer. Plagueis may have mastered the ancient Sith art of essence transfer, that is, passing on his consciousness into a new body before his physical death. It's supported by the fact that Plagueis treated his apprentice quite selfishly, merely prepping up Sidious as a vessel for his soul and nothing else. Let's tell you here that Plagueis didn't die by the very first blast fired by Palpatine. Plagueis was trying to gather his midi-chlorians, or so we think. Perhaps he was transferring his essence to a new host before his physical body gave up. The novel states that immediately after Plagueis' death, Palpatine senses a disturbance in the Force, which prompts him to think whether Plagueis truly died or has achieved immortality. Later, Palpatine explains this disturbance as perhaps Plagueis himself trying to reach out to him from beyond the Force. Moreover, it's believed that Plagueis playing around with midi-chlorians is how Anakin Skywalker was created, and Anakin's midi-chlorian count is the highest recorded ever, at over 20,000 per cell, suggesting an exceptionally strong connection to the Force. Thus, it is possible that Plagueis created Anakin with the intention of moving into his remarkably Force-sensitive body, one that would keep him alive longer than the less perfect bodies of Sidious and others. What Plagueis perhaps didn't foresee was Anakin's body deteriorating because of injuries, and that Anakin would renounce the dark side to save his son, Luke Skywalker. Once Anakin's body was damaged, Plagueis perhaps was forced to settle for a not-so-perfect host. This is where the character Snoke comes in. Before it was revealed that Snoke was created by Darth Sidious, the character's deformed and battered appearance made fans speculate that it can be Plagueis in disguise. To sum it up, fans like the idea that Plagueis somehow survived Palpatine's murder attempt and continued to influence Sith politics from behind the scenes, kinda like a Force ghost. Marvelous verdict: the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise is that he tries to mess with the Force, and the Force fights back because it's always seeking balance. He tries to achieve eternal life, but is murdered when he gets close to unlocking immortality. All said and done, this Sith Master is an extremely intriguing character with a twisted past that ties him to the main Star Wars storyline, and we'd love to witness Darth Plagueis in action in a pre-sequel movie about him and his treacherous apprentice Darth Sidious. Those who are in favor of seeing Darth Plagueis on screen, say aye, and please share your thoughts in the comment section below. May the Force be with you.
And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.